It is April 1923. Germany is experiencing one of the worst economic collapses in modern history. The French and Belgian armies have occupied the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland, in response to missed reparations payments. Hyperinflation is spiraling. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January will cost 3,465 marks by July and 201 billion marks by November. Adolf Hitler, still a private citizen with no government office, takes the stage in Munich and delivers a speech that is, on its surface, a call for national unity and willpower. Beneath the surface, it is something more specific, a direct argument that democracy must be destroyed, that hatred is a civic virtue, and that the swastika banner will fly over all of Germany. This is the speech of a man who is no longer building a theory. He is building a timeline.
In the Bible we find the text, "That which is neither hot nor cold will I spew out of my mouth." This utterance of the great Nazarene has kept its profound validity until the present day. He who would pursue the golden mean must surrender the hope of achieving the great and the greatest aims. Until the present day, the half-hearted and the lukewarm have remained the curse of Germany.
The opening is a Bible quotation, specifically from the book of Revelation, and its choice is deliberate. By anchoring his argument in Scripture, Hitler borrows the moral authority of religious tradition to condemn political moderation. The great Nazarene is Jesus, and what Hitler is doing here is using Christ as a witness for his own radicalism. Even God, he implies, despises the half-hearted. This is not a casual rhetorical flourish. It is a calculated move to make extremism sound not just rational, but divinely sanctioned, to tell an audience steeped in Christian culture that their faith itself demands total commitment. Notice that the target of this opening is not Jews, not enemies, not traitors. It is moderation. Compromise, the golden mean. Hitler is preemptively condemning the very instinct toward restraint that might otherwise lead his audience to question what follows.
To the half-heartedness and weakness of the parties in Parliament was added the half-heartedness of governments. Everything stood under the sign of half-heartedness and lukewarmness, even the fight for existence in the World War, and still more the conclusion of peace. And now the continuation of the half-hearted policy of those days holds the field. The people inwardly united in the hard struggle, in the trenches there were neither parties nor confessions, has been torn asunder through the economics of profiteers and knaves. Appeasement and the settlement of differences would certainly soon be there if only one were to hang the whole crew. But profiteers and knaves are, of course, citizens of the state, and what is more important still, they are adherents of the religion, which is hallowed by the Talmud.
Two things are happening simultaneously in this passage. The first is the myth of the trenches. Hitler invokes World War I as a moment of pure national unity. No parties, no confessions. A brotherhood dissolved by politicians and profiteers back home. This is a powerful and largely false image. The German trenches were in fact marked by class resentment, political division, and by 1918, open mutiny and collapse of morale. But the myth of the unified front betrayed by civilian cowards was enormously resonant to veterans, and Hitler was speaking to many of them. The second move is more direct. Profiteers and knaves who deserve to be hanged are identified as followers of the religion hallowed by the Talmud. This is the anti-Semitic accusation wrapped in a thin layer of indirection. He does not say Jews, but every person in that room understands exactly who he means. The indirection is not caution. It is a technique. Letting the audience complete the sentence themselves makes them complicit in the conch.
Even today we are the least loved people on earth. A world of foes is ranged against us, and the German must still today make up his mind whether he intends to be a free soldier or a white slave.
This is existential threat framing compressed to two sentences. The least loved people on earth positions Germany as a victim surrounded by a hostile world, a nation under permanent siege. The binary that follows, free soldier or white slave, leaves no room for any other option. Not a citizen, not a worker, not a person living a private life, a soldier or a slave. This false dichotomy is one of the most reliable tools of authoritarian mobilization. It converts a political situation, however genuinely difficult, into an emergency that demands total commitment and eliminates the legitimacy of any response short of total war. The phrase white slave carries an additional charge in 1923 Germany, where racial hierarchy was already a mainstream political concept. White here is not incidental. It is a reminder of what is supposedly at stake in biological terms.
The only possible conditions under which a German state can develop at all must therefore be the unification of all Germans in Europe, education towards a national consciousness, and readiness to place the whole national strength without exception in the service of the nation.
The unification of all Germans in Europe is the demand for Großdeutschland, a greater Germany incorporating German-speaking populations across Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and beyond. In 1923, this sounds like a cultural aspiration. By 1938, it will be the justification for the annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland. By 1939, it will be the pretext for the invasion of Poland. Hitler is not inventing these ambitions in this speech. They were part of German nationalist discourse long before him, but he is stating them as non-negotiable preconditions for German existence, not as political goals to be pursued through diplomacy. The phrase, whole national strength without exception, is also doing work. It is the demand for total mobilization, for a society in which no individual interest exists apart from the national interest. This is the ideological foundation of the totalitarian state.
No economic policy is possible without a sword, no industrialization without power. Today we have no longer any sword grasped in our fist. How can we have a successful economic policy? England has fully recognized this primary maxim in the healthy life of state. For centuries, England has acted on the principle of converting economic strength into political power, while conversely, political power in its turn must protect economic life. The instinct of self-preservation can build up economics, but we sought to preserve world peace instead of the interests of the nation, instead of defending the economic life of the nation with the sword and of ruthlessly championing those conditions which were essential for the life of the people.
The argument here, that economic prosperity requires military power, is presented as a timeless historical law, illustrated by England as a model. The historical observation has some validity. British imperial trade was indeed backed by naval force, but Hitler is using a real historical pattern to draw a false conclusion, that Germany's economic collapse in 1923 was caused by insufficient military aggression rather than by a lost war, crushing reparations, and mismanaged monetary policy. He is also, implicitly, making the case for rearmament, still illegal under the Treaty of Versailles, by framing it not as militarism, but as an economic necessity. The phrase, world peace instead of the interests of the nation, is the clearest statement yet of what he is proposing, a Germany that places its own interests above international law, above treaties, above the principle of peaceful coexistence. This is not a foreign policy argument. It is a declaration of intent.
3 years ago, I declared in this same room that the collapse of the German national consciousness must carry with it into the abyss the economic life of Germany as well. For liberation, something more is necessary than an economic life policy, something more than industry. If a people is to become free, it needs pride and willpower, defiance, hate, and once again, hate.
Hate, and once again, hate. This is the emotional core of the speech, and it is stated with a directness that even by Hitler's standards is remarkable. He is not calling for anger or for justice or for resistance. He is calling for hatred, repeated 3 times, the third time as a deliberate echo of the Shema, the central prayer of Judaism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. Whether the triple repetition is a conscious inversion of Jewish liturgy or simply a rhetorical triple for emphasis is debated by historians. What is not debated is the function. To present hatred not as a regrettable byproduct of oppression, but as a necessary precondition for liberation, a virtue, a duty, something to be cultivated and held on to. When a political movement tells its followers that hatred is not a flaw to be overcome, but a quality to be trained, it has crossed a line from which return is very difficult. An audience that has been told its hatred is righteous will not easily be persuaded to lay it down.
The spirit comes not down from above, that spirit which is to purify Germany, which with its iron besom is to purify the great sty of democracy. To do that is the task of our movement. The movement must not rust away in Parliament, it must not spend itself in superfluous battles of words, but the banner with the white circle and the black swastika will be hoisted over the whole of Germany on the day which shall mark the liberation of our whole people.
The closing image is carefully constructed. Democracy is a sty, a pigsty, a place of filth and animals, and the movement's task is to purify it with an iron besom, a hard broom. This is the language of cleansing, of sanitation, of removing something unclean. The rhetoric of purification is one of the most dangerous in the political vocabulary because it converts political opponents into contaminants, not people to be defeated in argument, but substances to be removed from the body politic. The explicit rejection of Parliament, the movement must not rust away in Parliament, is equally significant. This is Hitler stating openly in April 1923 that his movement does not intend to win through elections. The swastika will fly over Germany not through votes, but through the kind of action he has been describing for the entire speech. 6 months later, on November 8th, he will attempt exactly that, the beer hall putsch, a violent attempt to seize power by force. It will fail. He will be imprisoned, and he will spend his time in prison writing the book that will carry all of this further. Adolf Hitler gave this speech in April 1923, 7 months before his failed coup attempt, 10 years before he came to power, and 20 years before the peak of the Holocaust. What is striking about it, read in sequence with the speeches that preceded it, is how complete the program already is, and how openly it is stated. The Bible has been recruited to condemn moderation, military conquest has been framed as economic necessity, hatred has been declared a civic virtue, democracy has been called a pigsty fit for the iron broom, and the swastika has been promised over all of Germany, not through Parliament, but through force. None of this was hidden. All of it was public. The lesson this speech offers is not about a particular ideology or a particular moment in history. It is about what happens when a society normalizes the escalation, when each speech is a little more explicit than the last, and each time the crowd cheers, and each time the consequences are deferred. Just long enough for the next speech to seem unremarkable by comparison.